So on to our special interactive discussion for today. I'd like to now invite our General Manager, Energy Markets, Daniel Anderson, to the stage. As a regular at our forum, I like to think Dan and his team are the closest thing we have to a crystal ball at Powerlink. He'll be providing background and insights on the very important work we have happening in central Queensland now and into the future. We've dropped a bit of show and tell on your tables in the break also, our latest update on all things central Queensland, as well as a hot off the press newsletter on our newest wind farm connection project in central Queensland. Members of our team are literally on the ground in Biloela and other townships today and over the weekend, engaging locally about the newest addition to our connections project stable with RWE. So feel free to have a look at those materials over the course of this session. And following his presentation, Dan will then join a panel of experts on stage for a discussion and Q&A, which will be moderated by our Executive General Manager, Energy Futures, Jackie Bridge. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Nicole. I'd like to build on the previous acknowledgements of country that we've heard today. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here in the room with us today. I just want to reflect on this morning's presentation and having both the former CEO and the current CEO of Powerlink on the stage, and just having them talk all things energy transformation, transmission and planning. It was just a real treat. So thank you, Paul and Merrin, for that opportunity. It was really good. Thank you. Natasha Brown, I didn't know. Happy birthday. Everyone give a big round of applause for Natasha again. But anyway, this middle session, why are we here and why are we focusing on central Queensland and more specifically Gladstone? Central Queensland has really well-developed infrastructure, including rail, road and electricity networks that support various industries, including refineries and smelters. Its deep water port, which was first established in the 1850s, is one of Australia's busiest, and it facilitates the exports of goods such as liquefied natural gas, coal and other minerals. It is home to well-known multinational resource organisations, including Santos, Orica, Incitec Pivot, AGL, Fortescue and Rio Tinto, just to name a few. The Gladstone area is at the forefront of an industrial revitalisation, setting an example for how other key Queensland load hubs can transform. This evolution will help Powerlink to shape its approach, engaging with crucial stakeholders and fostering regional development. Powerlink has been part of the Gladstone region for over 50 years. In the mid-1970s, we expanded the Powerlink 275 kV network to connect into the Gladstone Power Station, which is Queensland's largest and oldest coal-fired generation. This created the northern part of the central to southern Queensland link, which supplied power into southeast Queensland. In the early 1990s, we set up the Werdong substation and the 275 kV supply into Boyne Island. Today, the network supplies most of the region's power needs, including the Boyne Island aluminium smelter, refineries at Queensland Alumina Limited and Yarwun, as well as railway loads at Yarwun and at Raglan and Coolamunda, I should say. We also connect to Ergon supply points at Gladstone, Gladstone North, Gladstone South, and the Yarwun substations. In late 2009, we established the Larkham Creek 275 kV to 132 kV substation in the Gladstone State Development Area to connect up future loads. This area now houses Fortescue's electrolyser manufacturing plant and will house future connections to the Aldoga Solar Farm, as well as Stanwell's CQH2 project. We realise that Gladstone will undergo considerable changes in the amount of electricity that it uses and how that is supplied over the next 10 to 15 years. Many of the businesses in the regions have ambitious emissions reductions targets. For example, Rio Tinto's 50% reduction by 2030. And I look forward to hearing Vic speak about that at the panel session that we've coming up next. They've also got the net zero emissions by 2050 and also complying with the federal government's safeguard mechanisms. To achieve these targets, these businesses, who are primarily supplied currently by a mix of oil and gas fossil fuels, are electrifying loads and seeking out renewable alternatives. From a load perspective, over the last 10 years, Gladstone has accounted between 20 to 25% of the annual state electricity supply. Outside southeast Queensland, it is the largest load centre at just over 1.1 gigawatts. We estimate that the impact of the electrification of new loads in the Gladstone area could result in an additional load of between 3 to 8 gigawatts. This is primarily made up of industrial electrification and potential hydrogen production. One thing that we're particularly interested in is the flexibility of this new load and what it means for the system. Ideally, having loads that can turn up and down with the variability of the renewable energy resources can supply benefits by balancing supply and demand. This helps maintain system security and can help reduce overall costs through less storage and new network build. We are also mindful that the traditional load growth has been incremental in nature rather than a step change, but this may not be the case in the future. New loads are more likely to put instant demand requirements onto our network, so right now we have the opportunity to plan for these new loads to minimise overall system costs. There is uncertainty for when these new loads will come online and how that will impact demand. This brings challenges with aligning our network investments with future generation and anticipated load growth. We need to assess our confidence in the timing of these investments and make prudent decisions regarding which investments we need to pursue. These will not only need to support the future load, but also to contribute to the decarbonisation of the Gladstone grid. Looking at power generation, we know the 1680 megawatt Gladstone Power Station is set to retire in 2035. Additionally, the 700 megawatt Callode B Power Station is scheduled to retire even earlier in 2028. Based on our previous experience of coal-fired generation retirements, we know that these dates move around with market conditions and other factors. We also know that they could choose to operate in a more different manner, for example, in a two-shifting mode or on a more seasonal basis. We also note that the Queensland Government is planning to release a power plant maintenance guarantee with the objective to ensure that all Queensland Government-owned power assets can operate reliably to the end of their lives. The current requirements under the National Electricity Rules is that any power station that is wanting to retire gives 3.5 years market notice. However, we know this is not enough time for us to build the required renewable energy to come in behind that retirement and also to reinforce the Powerlink system. Given this, we need to anticipate the changes and plan ahead to make sure that everything is ready well in advance, otherwise we could face issues with system reliability and security. The intermittent nature of renewable energies means that for every megawatt of coal-fired generation that's retired, it needs to be replaced by 3 to 4 times the capacity from a mix of both wind and solar resources backed up by storage and or firming. Encouragingly, there is a strong pipeline of renewable projects in central Queensland with over 30 gigawatts of batteries, solar and wind projects in various stages of development. There we go. This future generation footprint will be bigger and not in the same place as the retiring coal-fired generation. And it's a big reason why we need to expand our transmission network to deliver more power into the Gladstone region. I'll now outline 2 ways that we've been working on how to bring that generation to market in a coordinated and cost-effective way. The first is the development of renewable energy zones. The Callode Renewable Energy Zone is expected to be the first REZ declared under the State's Energy Act. Situated to the west of Gladstone, it's expected to have a transmission hosting capacity of approximately 2.7 gigawatts and have up to 4 gigawatts of installed renewable energy sources, primarily focusing on wind generation. Powerlink is also considering the development of the Calliope Renewable Energy Zone in central Queensland. With expected capacity of between 1.5 to 2 gigawatts, the project aims to connect to a new proposed transmission line from Calvale to Calliope River. The second way that Powerlink is coordinating generation in a cost-effective way is the rethink of our high-capacity transmission plans from southern to central Queensland. As Paul highlighted this morning, the previous plan ran up the coast from a Woolooga to a substation that was just west of Gladstone. Our latest market data shows that there is over 10 gigawatts of developer interest located inland further west, which is a great resource for the increasing Gladstone load. As Paul also highlighted today, by relocating this route inland, we can save up to 300 kilometres of transmission line build, which is a great outcome for all Queenslanders. It also means that we can allow for the connection to be built in stages and paced to align with the interest for renewable connections. This will provide connections that are closest to the high levels of wind penetration generation and also result in the lower cost for renewable energy developers, reducing the overall cost for Queenslanders. This is another way that Powerlink is listening to the market, being market-led, and not thinking that we are smarter than the market. From a network perspective, to prepare for the transition of the Gladstone region, Powerlink is undertaking a reinforcement of the Gladstone system, otherwise known as the Gladstone project. Stuart Bell at last year's Transmission Network Forum laid the groundwork for this development. To recap, at a very high level, it includes 3 additional 275 kV transmission lines between Calval to Calliope River, which will hopefully house the Calliope Res, Larkham Creek to Baldercombe, and Calliope River to Larkham Creek, together with potential works to provide system security services in lieu of those provided by a retiring Gladstone power station. The Gladstone project is an important first step in decarbonising the Gladstone region. The project will provide additional capacity to allow for the decarbonisation of the existing loads and establishment of a new green industry in the area. Further support will then be provided by that high-capacity link from southern to central Queensland. And finally, I'd like to briefly touch on some key enablers to help us coordinate load, generation and network. Firstly, priority transmission investments. The Gladstone project is Powerlink's first priority transmission investment under the Queensland Energy Act, and we held a webinar on it earlier in the year. The Priority Transmission Investment Framework is a new approach and allows the Queensland Government to fund critical transmission projects at the scale and pace required to meet Queensland's emissions reductions objectives. Roger Smith, our Revenue Reset Director, will have more to say about this in our panel session coming up. To assist in the deployment of renewables, Powerlink will also carry out some new roles under the Energy Act. One of these is as the RES delivery body. As the RES delivery body, Powerlink will provide input into the Queensland Government's RES roadmap and coordinate how renewable projects connect to the transmission network in the RESs. This helps to ensure that we get the right mix of generation at the right time, at the right location. In delivering RESs, Powerlink will also coordinate engagement activities with the Queensland Government and renewable energy developers to ensure that landholders, communities and stakeholders can provide input and feedback and are listened to. And finally, on social responsibility, we know that we need to acquire land and easements for the projects in the Gladstone area. Our current approval timeframes could challenge the timely delivery of our projects, and we need to have efficient processes given the need for new easements and substation sites. We must collaborate closely, establishing a strategic approach to approvals and offsets with the relevant regulators, federal departments and other stakeholders. We know that social licence is nowhere guaranteed, and we must continually improve our social performance. As Paul discussed earlier, support for renewables has dropped in regional communities. People want involvement and clarity on what they gain from the energy transformation. Dana Boxell, our General Manager for Community Services and Delivery, will be on the panel and we'll talk more about that soon. So this has provided a really brief overview of the load, generation and network requirements within the Gladstone area. What it highlights is that there is an enormous amount of activity and change occurring. From an operations perspective, with the retirement of the Gladstone Power Station and the increasing load, we expect the region to shift from a net exporter of energy to one of a net importer. We are aware that planning for these larger or transformative changes is different from our traditional incremental approaches that we've used in the past. And while we have left the starting blocks, we realise that it is a very long race that will require engagement and consultation with customers, Central Queensland communities and stakeholders. We must continually review our plans, which may include the introduction of new technologies, new infrastructure projects, or shifts in service delivery models. Efficient planning and coordination is absolutely crucial. As we manage these significant changes, it is vital that all stakeholders, including all of us in the room here today, that's the generators, industry, government and community, collaborate to ensure our plans meet both future and present requirements. Through coordination, we can share knowledge, optimise resources and respond to emerging challenges. By working together, we can seize the opportunities that this transition presents and secure a stable and sustainable energy future for the Gladstone region and more broadly, Queensland. Thank you. I'll now welcome Jackie Bridge, Energy Futures EGM, up onto the stage to facilitate the panel.
Thanks very much, Daniel. A little bit shorter here. I would like to. I've been looking forward to the chance to get up here on the stage and have a look at the room from this vantage point, And certainly we know that this Transmission Network Forum is really valuable to Powerlink as a chance to engage with our customers and stakeholders. And based on the number of people in the room and the number online, I can see it's a pretty clear signal that this is valuable to our customers and stakeholders as well. So what we're going to do in the panel discussion is tease out some of the additional questions that I think you might be interested to know more about. Please take a seat, Daniel, and I'll welcome to the stage the other panellists. So we've got Vic Selvaraja, who is the General Manager, Rio Tinto Energy and Climate, and we have two more of our General Managers from Powerlink. So Dana Boxall is our General Manager for Community and Service Delivery, and Roger Smith, who has until recently been our General Manager Portfolio Acting and has recently taken on the role to lead our next revenue reset, which we're all excited to be embarking on once again. So, welcome everybody. Daniel's given us a terrific overview and summary of what's happening in Central Queensland. I'd like to start with Vic. As a very large customer in Central Queensland, would you tell us a little bit more about Rio Tinto's operations and your energy ambitions for the future?
Thanks, Jackie, and it's such a privilege to be up here to talk about our business and the role that we play in the Gladstone community and the region. Right, we employ over 3,000 people in Gladstone at our smelters and refineries, and consume almost 10 terawatt hours of electricity a year across those three assets today. That's 1 in 5 electrons delivered by the Queensland transmission system. Is delivered to one of our sites. So it's actually a fundamentally significant part of the Queensland energy system, but it's also such a significant anchor to the Gladstone community. Almost everybody in Gladstone is either directly employed by us, married to someone who's employed by us, or is the kid of someone who's employed by us. Right? It's kind of a crazy concept. I've spent lots of time up there, and it's a really it's a wonderful community, and we're really optimistic about the opportunity for Central Queensland to be the industrial hub of the future. But we are in a situation at the moment, and have been for several years, where the escalating costs of coal and gas have put that business and put that industry, the aluminium industry in Central Queensland, super energy intensive, at risk, right? And that's a real risk, and that's one of the reasons why we have been working so hard in recent years to find a way to reset the competitive basis of that industry. At the end of the day, the industry exists in Australia, in Queensland, in Central Queensland, built on low-cost, internationally competitive energy prices, and we need to find a way to get back to that, basis for competitiveness in the future. Doing that, and so that's why we're really excited about the opportunity that we have to partner with Powerlink, to partner with all the developers in this room, to electrify our processes, to replace the coal and gas that's currently either burnt in Gladstone Power Station, which we also happen to own, and or directly combusted at our sites with electricity and with renewable electricity that we know is going to be the long-term most competitive source of energy, which then sets us up to be a fantastic business with a long-term future in the region. And to just give you a sense of scale, we think that over the next decade, we'll likely almost double our electricity use in Central Queensland. So, going from 1 in 5 electrons to 2 in 5 electrons. Well, I think the system's growing as well, so we'll play our role in that, though.
So I guess building on Dan's presentation and that really clear indication of that sense of scale, before I ask the Powerlink people to speak, what do you think the best way is for Powerlink to support those future energy needs?
The partnership that we've had with Powerlink, spans back, as you pointed out, Daniel, to the connection of Gladstone to the Queensland electricity system. So for over 50 years, Rio Tinto and our predecessor companies have been working with Powerlink, and we think we've got a fantastic relationship, and we're looking forward to maintaining that strong relationship for the long term. And I'm sure that's the case for every large transmission connected customer, but us especially. the challenge in this current moment, I think, is to be able to articulate to the community and articulate to governments and policymakers the need for investment ahead of demand. We can't wait for demand to secure that investment in the transmission system. The transmission system is so fundamental to the competitiveness of our industry, of every energy-intensive industry in Australia in the future, and the ability for Powerlink to invest ahead of that demand to create the white space for industries like ourselves to grow into is going to be the fundamental basis for competitiveness in the long term, right? And so I think we need to do a better job working together to tell the story to the community, to governments about why we need to invest, what's the cost of that investment, both in terms of the fiscal cost of that investment, but also the community cost of that investment, but also what the benefits of that investment are. The beautiful thing about what we do is that we actually can directly point to an electron turning into a job in Gladstone. And working with us to tell that story more clearly, I think, is a good way to build the basis for that investment ahead of demand.
Thanks, Vic. I think that storytelling is something that's becoming more and more important for all of us in this industry. But I'm going to zoom in on investment. So Roger's been leading our work on the priority transmission investment, which is an investment pathway that's specific to Queensland. So I'm going to ask you, Roger, can you tell us a bit more about the priority transmission investment framework and why was Gladstone selected as the first project to go through this pathway?
Thanks, Jackie. I should first say there's many people in the room who have been fundamental in developing the, we'll call it PTI framework for ease. Yeah. So fundamentally, it's a framework, it's a state-based framework to support the scale and pace of transmission line build needed to support and enable the energy transition. It sits outside of the national rules, and that's intentional to make sure that it can be set up to deliver the requirements, and it can be built around the objectives of Queensland and achieving the outcomes that Queenslanders need. In terms of what it does, it sits outside the rules, but it is very much based on the rules, the procedures, the policies within those rules. So it effectively replaces the regulatory investment test for transmission that many people in the room would be aware of, and also replaces the contingent project application process. So it builds a whole framework around consultation, identifying the need that is being driven, looks for alternative solutions where there may be opportunities for non-network solutions to meet some of the need or all of the need. And then it also works through the inclusion of that and the cost recovery of that investment as well. So in terms of why Gladstone is the first project, I think Paul, Dan and Vic have all sort of captured that more eloquently than I can put it. But decarbonising Queensland is fundamental and one of our top strategic priorities that we're seeking to achieve right now. The timeframes that we're operating within are very tight. There are challenges in delivering the infrastructure, and the investment certainty that comes through the PTI will be, tremendously helpful in achieving those goals.
Thank you. Okay, and so just to give everybody a little bit more information about that process, can you give us an idea of where is that project up to in the PTI process, and what are the next steps that we could expect to see?
So the regulation that enables the PTI framework came into place in July this year. Within 2 weeks, we issued the first consultation document and commenced consultation on the process. That was achieved through a lot of collaboration with members of our customer panel, members of the AER that will be acting as the suitably qualified persons for the assessment of that PTI, and also through members of the department who were sort of instrumental in putting the framework together in the first place. So a really collaborative approach in getting a very speedy commencement on the PTI process. We managed to get the first stage of the consultation completed to support the what is called the submission to the ministers back in August, and then that was turned around into a further direction for Powerlink to commence the formal assessment of the investment at the end of September, which we are now in that phase. We are due to go back to the ministers on the 6th of June with the recommendations and all the information supporting that investment and the needs for that investment. And so at the moment, what we're doing is we're drilling into the credible options that we identified in the original consultation document. We're firming up on the pricing that will feed into the economic assessment. We're also looking at the responses to that submission. So any potential non-network proponents, things like voltage support, those kind of services. We're also going to be working with those proponents to understand the costs, the commencement date of that, and how that builds into part of the solution. So we're really just gearing up for the next phase of consultation, which we anticipate to be late March, early April next year.
Okay, thank you. And I think a number of people in this audience will be invited to be part of that consultation process, and we look forward to hearing from you. So planning, one of the fundamentals of planning a network is that we look ahead and we anticipate the needs of a region in the future, and we plan assets that will be in place for decades. Daniel, you've given us an overview of the project as it stands at the moment, but can you give us some insights into some of the technical and forecasting challenges that we're dealing with as we look at the decarbonisation of Central Queensland?
Yeah, sure, Jackie. I think, in summary, planning and forecasting is very hard. And to reflect on what Merrin said this morning is it's a cyclical process. So we're continually replanning based on what we see in front of us and changing our plans pretty quickly as well. But I think if we reflect historically from a load base, we've really understood what the underlying demand and how that's increased. And our network has been able to accommodate for smaller changes in that. But I think in the future, and if you just take the Gladstone region, it's kind of like a load of around 1 gigawatt, could go anywhere up to 8 gigawatts. There's a real considerable step change there, and we're not, this is new territory for us in how we play in that space. And I think there's a whole lot of uncertainty about the timing of that load and how it comes in, especially with the electrification of transportation, mining loads, and also hydrogen production. So there's a whole lot of industry pieces there that are evolving in that space. I think the other things that we're very interested in is really the phasing, and as our project's going to come on in small chunks, or are they going to come on instantaneously all at once, and how do we shift the network and develop it over time, given the lumpiness of transmission and how that plays out. And I think the other thing that, especially from a load perspective, is challenging is that load is becoming more weather dependent. And I'll point to the peak demand that we had on the 22nd of January this year. For those of you that remember it, it was the first day back at school. It was a hot, humid day after based and diurnal to complement the solar. And the reason behind that is we don't need to build as much storage within that. So if we can get good complementary wind, it actually reduces overall system costs. But I think, and I'm looking at Ed and Emma here from our ops department, they're really interested in the weather too, to see how that impacts how they operate the future grid in that space. So having certainty around these weather forecasts from a 10-day, 5-day, 1 day, 1 hour, 5 minute really dictates how they will operate that future network, whether they can take outages, whether they have to recall crews. And that's people on the ground, that's labour hours. So if they have to be continually doing that, that can put costs on projects too. So we need to improve the tools in that space.
Okay, thank you. So I think Vic painted a great picture of how important some of the large industrials in Gladstone are, such as Rio, to the community. Dana leads our community and delivery services team, and a critical part of delivering the energy infrastructure is engaging with communities and understanding what's going on. So I wanted to get you, Dana, to tell us a little bit more about environmental and planning approvals and what PowerLink is doing in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. And I guess just on that topic, I just want to firstly acknowledge the importance of those planning and approval processes for our projects. The EPBC Act is Australia's, it's crucial. It's a central piece of legislation for our environment, and it's really important that as we are going and developing our projects, that those unique plant and animals and habitats are protected and managed, and that's really important for our country. But what we are seeing with these approval processes is that for those projects that are requiring approval under the EPBC Act, which most large-scale infrastructure projects will, it can take up to 2 years. And the ability to get those approval processes efficiently is really important to minimise risks around project delays and cost increases. So, it's really on the critical path for a lot of our projects. So at PowerLink, we've been working on a few initiatives to help support having more efficient approval processes. One of those Paul talked to earlier was we've been working really closely with the federal department, around exploring opportunities to build those efficiencies into our environmental approval processes. And that has culminated in an MOU, which was recently finalised, and we were able to put that into place a few weeks ago. And that's really capturing a lot of those initiatives that we've been working with the department around. One of the things that's included in there is that we have a new environmental assessment program that we're piloting through the MOU. We've got a couple of projects that we're putting through that process at the moment. So it's really important that we can get work with the department really closely through all of our corridor selection processes, get the right information into the department at key junctures in our process, so that when we get to referral stage, we've got the best information in there, and it's really the ability then to stop that rework and submission that's happened, that iterative process that really adds delays to those approval processes. I think just quickly, another one I'll talk to is just on offsets. So I think, as we're going through our processes, you can't always avoid all impacts. But the ability to locate, secure and manage offsets is becoming more and more challenging. So we are looking at also those opportunities to get strategic offsets where we can, and that's really around collaborating with key state agencies or other organisations, and identify where those opportunities exist.
Okay, thank you. So we heard in Paul's presentation and a couple of other comments that some of the measures of community support and community sentiment in the regions has been declining. And so building that social licence and trust with our communities and customers is increasingly important. Dana, can you talk a little bit more about, what can energy proponents do to build that trust and social licence in Central Queensland communities? And particularly, we hear a bit about concern about the risk of cumulative impacts. So it's not just the one project, there's multiple projects for generation and transmission. How do we go about doing that well?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So that cumulative piece is a really important issue for us to consider. As we've seen through the presentations today, there is a lot of activity happening in our region, and particularly in that Central Queensland region. We've heard of landholders that have had up to 20 projects come to them, and as you can imagine, that's overwhelming, and they don't know who to trust. And what we're seeing, really sadly, is those communities is creating divide within those regions, and we've also seen that happen within families. So it's really important for us to think, around the impacts that we're having. So I think as we're there's not just also the energy transition that is impacting our communities. We've also got, as we talked about earlier, there's a cost of living and a housing crisis. And along with, all the other local social and economic issues that are happening out in those regions, that all forms part of that cumulative impact that our regions are experiencing. So we're certainly not the only people that they're having to work with at the moment. And we talk a little bit, we talk about social licence all the time and that concept of what that is. And I think it's important, again, that we recognise that is, it's about building trust and understanding to get acceptance of activities, but it's not a set and forget. And it's certainly something that is hard to measure, when you have it, when you don't have it. But I think what we all need to do is put focus into those areas that we know can build trust with communities. And through our community sentiment surveys that we've run at PowerLink, we've seen those consistent themes come through over the last few years. And that was talked to a little bit earlier as well. So it's really around that. The couple of those key ones is around procedural fairness, about the ability for communities to feel like they have a voice and that we are listening and they're heard and they're informing our decision-making processes. So we need to involve communities early and authentically. So it's really important that we do that at the right times in our projects. It's not, we've heard of engagement fatigue as well, so we've got to get that balance right and work on opportunities to collaborate around that as well to reduce those impacts. I think with that as well, that needs to be backed up by really clear, transparent and accountable processes to give communities the confidence that we are doing the right thing. And the other one is really around that distributional fairness. So it's important that communities are feeling like they're receiving a fair share of the benefits that these projects are having. So it's those opportunities again to make sure those agreements that we're making, have that mutual benefit and looking for long-lasting legacy benefits, those real tangible items that communities will see. Our infrastructure's there for a really long time, so it's important that as we're looking at those opportunities, we're also creating that economic prosperity for our communities in those regions. I think, listening to the presentations earlier today, and I think if I reflect on what would have been talked around a few years ago, the amount of times we probably heard the word community said today, I think it really highlights communities are at the heart of this energy transition. And I think and I think everyone in the room here would be well aware that we are all going to be judged by the lowest common performer. So we're all seen as one, and so it's really important that we think about the social responsibility of the whole energy industry. And what I'd really like for us all to think about is how do we look to improve that social responsibility and our social performance across the industry. And I think equally, or maybe more importantly, is actually how do we all lift together and make sure we do keep communities at the front of mind in all of our decisions.
Thank you, Donna. A clear call to action, and I think it's fair to say we are all on a very steep learning journey in terms of what is needed to do the community engagement well, to interact and to deliver the energy infrastructure that we need to support our communities. So I think a summary of what we've heard is Daniel's given us a great overview of why Central Queensland is important. Vic's made it very real in terms of the interaction and importance of decarbonising, not only for business but for the communities that those businesses employ. Roger's given us an overview of the investment pathway for the projects that we have in the pipeline, and Dana has finished that out with the call to action of how do we deal with communities, make sure those benefits are there and make sure we've got that social licence to deliver. So that is hopefully giving a bit of food for thought for our next activity, and I think Nicole is waiting in the wings to take over. So could you please thank the panel, Daniel Anderson, Vic Selvaraja, Dana Boxall and Roger Smith. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Got a nice Christmassy vibe going on between Jackie and I if we stay on stage together. So as Jackie said, now it's your turn. So this is the part of the day where we look to all of you in the room and online to provide us with your valuable insights. It's always a very important part of this forum that we get your feedback and input to feed back into our decision making and planning, as Jackie said. For those in the room, at each of your tables, there should be a PowerLink representative who'll guide the conversation and take notes so that we make sure we capture your thoughts. Could those people please put their hand up at the table so they know who you are if they don't already? And if there isn't a PowerLink person with their hand in the air, also yell out and let us know. I am conscious there are a few tables where there's only a couple of you, so if you want to just take an opportunity now to consolidate so that we don't have two people just having a chat for the next little while. Thank you. I'd point you out, but I literally can't see that far. To our online folk, we would love for you to provide your insights to the questions we'll be discussing at our tables. These same questions are captured in an online form which our moderator will share with you shortly with some further instructions. So please just hold and he'll share that form with you in just a moment. For the online people, you can also come back in about 30 minutes to hear the playback from our table discussions in the room. So for everyone back in the room, now it's time I'll hand over to your table host to take you through our 3 questions based on everything you've just heard on the screen behind me and also printed out on your tables. Over to you and happy chatting.
Hello, hello, hello. We're now going to have a playback session of all the great insights that we've been putting down. I think for most of you are aware we are running an online session today, and people who are online had the opportunity to fill in a form. We've got Jerry Riley, who loves a microphone, at the back, our GM Comms. He's going to provide some insights from the online session.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. A really good turnout online and some really good input with regards to these 3 questions. I just might touch on 3 sort of themes that have come out of the online responses. One was this overarching concept that this is very, very complex. It's going to be almost impossible to absolutely time the transmission infrastructure with load growth and what's happening. And so they actually believe that if we're going to err, it's probably better to be just a bit early rather than just a bit late from a transmission perspective. The other thing that was really strong from online responses was the need for PowerLink to provide more detail around timings of delivery of this infrastructure and how can we provide that earlier to the market so that they know our delivery timeframes in this region. From a social licence and community perspective, there was a big call out around bringing community investment as early as possible in the process. So I think the traditional model of community investment is where the investment ramps up with the CapEx spend, but how do we actually bring that investment forward in the delivery of these projects?
So more detailed information sooner and be early is kind of how I summarise that.
That's right.
Cool. Thanks, Jerry. Frank Montiel, are you in the room? Can we get Frank a mic? He's going to...
Thank you. We had some very similar themes as well. We've got developers at the table, and the table also saw that the PTI process is very helpful in order to build some firmness around the timeframes that PowerLink's going to deliver their transmission, which is essential for the generation projects to get commitment. So that was seen as very important. In terms of social licence and community perspectives, it was around coordination of activities and what can PowerLink do to help with that coordination, for developers to understand what sort of engagement PowerLink has already been doing, and have maybe an umbrella approach, have a supplier night, have a communication piece, and not just around the transmission or a solar farm or some other thing, but the whole thing. the region, Gladstone. There was a comment about, wouldn't it be great if everyone could hear the message that we've heard today from Rio Tinto, which was all around, the jobs and the sort of economic and not about decarbonisation, as Paul was talking about earlier. And then on the timing of the network investment, that was very tricky. Acknowledgement that there's a very big potential step change, but we need to do the base first. So it was all like a pyramid. We got to make room to serve the existing load, and we've got to develop the plans to be scalable. Knowing that we can't build all of the infrastructure that covers everything, but I thought that from a regrets perspective, having more earlier is better than having less later.
So that earlier piece came through again from the table. Yeah, it's really good. And Vic, opportunity, mate, I think for you to do some TikToks on Rio Tinto in the region. I think there's a new career for you there, mate. Emma Rogers, can we hear from you, please?
Thank you. So we overachieved and have a few pages, so I'll try and sum this up. We certainly spoke about, in terms of providing the investment certainty around the declaration of the RES being a really important piece. And not just the declaration, but being able to provide transparency on the movement towards it, and those other aspects being the regulations, what's in the RES management plans. But it's about comms in progress, and a very similar discussion being on the timing of the PTI. There's a lot of stuff out there from the planning work in 2022. Well, what is the timing change now? What's the progress on it? What's the pace of it? So what's the acceleration? We did heavily speak about, both in terms of investment certainty and the community, about we have as Powerlink have a lot of visibility in the region. So we see a lot of things that other people may not put two and two together in terms of investment. So what's our role to play in terms of helping local governments identify that we need to build some roads? So TMR might be looking at roads, but how many turbines need to be transported on those roads? What other things happen in the region? So just sharing what we see that others don't. And just really a call out here in terms of the community piece. We spoke about there's a lot of intelligent people in this room, and we are all frothing at all the technical concepts that we've been talking this morning, including lots of charts. But what's the role of broader energy education to our communities, and how do we pull that together? Just that's a big piece that we need to come together and play a role in. How do we make sure and keep that information factual? How do we make sure it's not just all the rosy things? We need to make sure that that's balanced about what impacts and benefits communities are seeing. So that's something collectively that everyone in this room, I think we need to get together and work on.
I agree. I think energy literacy is really important to help the broader debate and discussion that we've got. Listening to what you say, though, kind of things around certainty and transparency are key in a lot of the discussions, whether it's putting out timings of our planning, but also with developers as well. Very good. Thank you. Alvin, have we got you in the room, mate? Can we get Alvin?
Thanks, Dan. So you look very similar conversation here, but yeah, key echoing of the information sharing early. How do we do this in a community, in a joint version, rather than each party going and doing their bits and pieces? So how do we work together with the community on that? What's the long-term investment? So as we know, with the certainty, with the investments we're going to make, what does this mean for the locals? do they get jobs continuous? And Vic, you get top marks in terms of what you explained about Rio, how almost everyone related has linked back to Rio in Gladstone. And that's, I guess, what people want to hear. What is the long-term outcome for them? There was bits and pieces shared in terms of what can Powerlink do to help with developers in terms of potentially explaining which stakeholders or which landholders do want infrastructure on their property or not. I'm not sure how we can do that from a privacy and confidentiality point of view, but is there a way we can work together to share that early so that way we don't go and upset the community in where we know infrastructure is not required or wanted, sorry. Second, in terms of the second question, key one, can we still meet the demand that we have right now? So that's in terms of the way we're going through with the infrastructure investment, getting approvals in time, are we going to be able to meet the demand now? And we didn't quite make to the third question, sorry.
It's all good. Thanks, Alvin. Appreciate those insights, really good. Monan, are you up the back? There she is. Monan's standing there.
Hello. We didn't have many people at our table, but we did have a lot of insights, some common themes. So on the first question about investment certainty, we talked about similar themes around how do we provide transparency, Powerlink to the market. And also we talk about this is quite a large volume work we're trying to do in central Queensland. Now it puts Powerlink at a bigger role in leading the market. So how do we leverage on that, and also really just sharing a lot of learnings and experience with our southern states across the NEM. To Marion's point, we're not really competing with each other. How do we really have common approaches, improve on our connection processes to get this done right? On the second question about community engagement, very similar to what Dana has already spoken about. We really talked about, we really have to bring in that unity of the energy industry, of having Powerlink leading, the community engagement, having a common approach, really establish the common frameworks and practices to reduce the pressure and impact we're going to have on our communities. On the third one, on the timing of the investment, I think what's going to really help the market is with Powerlink being able to provide more transparency and closer collaboration. We talk about more one-on-one conversations or smaller forums, more frequent forums throughout the year to be able to gauge insights, but also we can do better, use that insights to do more planning and sharing that visibility of a stage-by-stage planning in terms of capacity available at different connection points to guide this massive transition in central Queensland.
Thanks, Monan. Some really common points there, but I really like the part about leveraging Powerlink's position within the region to, I think, going back to that energy literacy point at this table, but also leaning on learnings from the broader industry as well. I think that they're two really good points. And last but not least, Tim de Jersey. Do we have you in the room? Tim has the best suits I've ever seen, so...
Thanks, Dan. Went for the country look today. So around that first point around the investment, look, the comment that was made is that in the red tape front, we're not as bad as the other states. I don't know if that's a pat on the back or if it's something we should be aspiring to, but the real conversation around providing policy certainty and government underwriting where required to keep this investment moving. A bit of a more broadly to try and centralise and coordinate the red tape side of things. And even bolder was the comment around Powerlink Australia. And it's this consistency across states conversation that seems to keep popping up, that there's different sets of rules in different jurisdictions, that perhaps that could provide some other ways to look at things. Moving into the social licence space, Vic touched on this beautifully. Gladstone's a great story in the fact that there's the families of workers. You know, if you're not working at Rio, you're the daughter, you're the wife, you're the son. That's a great story to tell, because Rio is also an international company and an international investor. So that's a great storytelling space to be in, to build on that social license front. And it's getting it back to the community, that granular space of what's in it for me. Rather than us shouting and saying, you need energy security, it's getting bringing that conversation right down to, what do I get out of it? What do I get out of it as that local person in the community? And with the end game of that community being shareholders in their infrastructure, and not specifically in the financial space, but just feeling like that they're part of it. Yeah. They're part of that conversation. Finally, in the best network investment to meet the future growth, it's that chicken or the egg conversation, isn't it? And it's constantly balancing that. I think there's some opportunity to really keep coordinating against the investment plans of the multiple industry stakeholders in that region, and to try and coordinate that as best as possible. And I think Powerlink is probably in a reasonable space to do that.
Cool. Thanks for that, Tim. So I think what I heard is coordinate red tape, coordinate across jurisdictions. Powerlink Australia, I heard. I'm not sure what Kathy and Paul think of that one at all. But really then build on the granularity of the what's in it for me message and build it up from a social licence perspective.
That's right. That's right.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for that. I will now hand back to Nicole to close out this session.
Thanks, Daniel. And thanks again to all of our Powerlink table hosts. We had to pretty much drag half the organisation in this time to make sure we had enough people. And thank you to all of our attendees for your energy, time, interest and input. It will go directly to help us expand our understanding and improve our decision making and planning going forward. As always, we will prepare a summary report of what we've discussed and the feedback that you've shared, which will be sent out to attendees and made available on our website. So we will take another break now, as well as an opportunity to grab some food. Please also take this as an opportunity to network and continue the information sharing. Your consistent feedback to us each year that this is also a very important part of why you attend this event. So please make the most of that time. We're raring to go on presenting the highlights of the 2024 Transmission Annual Planning Report though, so please be back in the room at 1:10 on the dot. For those of you online that are rejoining us, we'll be back here at that time. Thank you very much.